Hey everyone, hope everyone's doing well and staying safe these days. I do have another motherboard review from MSI, the B760M Mortar motherboard. This is actually geared for Intel's 12th and 13th generation CPUs. I know 14th gen is just around the corner. So we're going to go have an in-depth review here, an unboxing, take a look at the BIOS, and of course have it installed in a computer here. So this is actually a smaller form factor motherboard than the usual regular ATX motherboards that I've actually done reviews for. So definitely let's go ahead and check it out and see how it performs. Let's go ahead and jump into the unboxing right away here. You can see the board. First thing you see immediately after opening up the box, looks like we have the box within a box packaging here in the motherboard box. Gonna go ahead and move this for just a moment and take a quick look at what we got inside. Looks like the usual stuff here with these newer MSI boards. A couple of little stickers here. Some cable labels right over here as well too. You can connect them to your SATA cables, fan cables, etc. RGB cables as well too. Quick installation guide, some EU regulatory notices. Looks like we have one SATA cable here, a pair of Wi-Fi antennas, and some standoff M2 screws for your NVMe drives that go right on the motherboard. Let's go ahead and remove this. Take a look at the motherboard itself. I always try to be really careful in removing these anti-static bags just in case I want to, well, definitely a good idea to go ahead and reuse them. You can never have too many anti-static bags, that's for sure. And I never try to rip this piece over here or try to warp the bag. Looks like that was a really good one right there. So I'm going to go ahead and take this out. Put this here for just a moment and you immediately see the board in its full magic. Alright, starting at the usual place, you can actually see there's a couple of 4 USB ports right over here. Right next to that we have a display port and also an HDMI connection right there as well too. And these are useful if your CPU has built-in graphics that you'll be using. These are the ports you'll be using for your video, unless of course you're going to be using a separate dedicated video card as well too, which you can always do even though your CPU does have integrated graphics. To the right of that, we have one USB-C port, very popular these days to actually use. Right above that, we have another USB port right there. Looks like probably a 3 or 3.1, just judging from the color. To the right of that, we have 2 additional USB ports. It looks like we have a total of about 8 ports, 1 USB-C, 7 USB-A ports as well. Just above that, we have our Ethernet port, which looks like it's to be a 2.5G connection. Very popular, becoming more commonplace these days. Haven't seen the 10G, but 2.5G is definitely becoming much more commonplace and the norm now with these new motherboards and generations and chipsets. And to the right of that, we have our little Wi-Fi connections. As I mentioned earlier, those little Wi-Fi antennas that came with the board. If you're going to be using Wi-Fi or even Bluetooth, I believe, then you'll be using these. You still can use Bluetooth even without the antennas connected, though I have noticed that the range is on some motherboards, maybe not this one, that might have actually changed over time, but the Bluetooth range is not as ideal, so you might be losing connections. I know that definitely happened to me connecting to a speaker. And finally, to the right of that, we have all our audio connections. Basically, there's your generic stereo connection right here, red instead of green. Down there we have a little optical connection, and everything else looks like all these other surround sound related connections as well too. Moving on to the board right over here, we do have on the bottom basically our front panel audio connection. So if you do have that audio connection for headphone and mic on the front panel of your computer, this will be the port you'll be using. These are becoming less commonplace these days since USB related audio devices, headsets, and everything else are becoming more commonplace. So you may or may not actually use this, but the option is there. Right next to that, we have looks like a 4-pin RGB connection want to go ahead and actually add some more lights to your case, that is the one to use. To the right of that, we have two 4-pin system fan connections. This motherboard looks like it has a couple of these. So that's going to be the connection you'll be using to connect your 3 or 4-pin fans as well. To the right of that there, we do have a very popular connection with these Intel-based boards, including this chipset, a Thunderbolt connection right over there. Very fast, so if you're going to be using, you have an available Thunderbolt front panel connection there, or even something to use in the rear, like basically an add-on card or whatnot, that's going to be the connection you'll be using. Further to the right there, even though these are a little bit old and outdated, it looks like we have two front panel USB 2 ports right there. So you can go ahead and connect those right there. These are actually not too popular, very similar to the front panel audio connection. I have actually seen some devices such as the power supply from Corsair actually utilize these connections here, basically to go ahead and monitor thermals and also voltage related settings in your power supply. To the right of that, we have that little TPM connection there, which has actually become much more popular since the release of Windows 11. Now this is actually the port connection used to connect a separate TPM chip. Not completely necessary if you plan to use Windows 11, because there is an onboard built-in TPM chip, which I'll actually get into a little bit when I'm doing the BIOS overview as well. And to the right of that, basically everyone's least favorite connection, though working on so many motherboards and whatnot, it's become more commonplace for me to be able to actually tell which connection's which. This is our front panel connections for power LED, reset button, power button, etc., etc. right there. As mentioned before, there are additional 2 SATA ports on the right side of the motherboard if you're going to be connecting hard drives internally. Old-fashioned 2.5mm SATA drives, those are the connections you'll be using, or even an optical drive if that's something in mind. Further to the right, we have a front panel USB 3.1 connection, very, very popular right there. And additionally, to the right of that, we have another USB-C front panel connection. You do have one port in the back, and now you have an additional port right here as well. So if you do have a USB-C on your front panel, that's the connection you'll be using. Basically been the standard for many years now, 24-pin power supply connection to feed power to the motherboard itself. This actually used to give enough power as well too for the CPU with some more time in the past, as well as a video card. Times have changed now, where the video card uses even more power than the board itself, and the CPU of course has its own dedicated power connection, which I'll get to in just a moment. That's usually located on the top. Further to the right, we actually have a pump fan connection, just basically another fan connection, as well as just adjacent to that another 4-pin fan connection as well. So just additional 2 fan connections right there. This one appears to be a pump fan connection, and the other one appears to be yet again well, actually let me just take a look at that. It actually could be your CPU fan. Yes, it is. You can actually see that right there. It is definitely important and highly recommended to connect the fans associated with these particular connections to the right one, because then your motherboard may freak out, think there's actually no CPU fan, and all the fans will start basically throttling up to the highest speed, thinking your board is overheating and whatnot, or basically there's been a fan malfunction, which is even worse. And definitely didn't miss it over here. We do have 4 DIMM slots, and I'll be using this in dual channels. So for dual channel, I'll be using this slot right here. And this one right over here as well, to the ideal 2 slots to be using for dual channel memory in this case. On the very top of the board, we have this pretty big heatsink right over here. Further to the right or left, depending on which way you're looking at the board, we do have our dual 8-pin CPU power connectors. As I mentioned before in other motherboard reviews, and I've actually gotten this question a number of times, you only really require just to plug in one if you're only going to be using the CPU basically in how it's supposed to be used. If you plan to overclock, definitely recommend connecting both of them. There's no harm in actually connecting both of them anyway. You only draw the power it needs, but just something to bear in mind, you don't necessarily have to connect both if you're not planning to overclock, or you're not using basically like a 200 watt power hungry CPU. And just a little bit of a view here of the I/O shield right there, with this huge heatsink covering all the stuff hidden right there. So this basically has the backplate built in, which is very useful. I actually really prefer that particular design right there. so you don't accidentally forget to put the back plate on your case at some point, which has always been annoying back in the old days. Moving on here to the very important features, just like the memory slots here. We do have our 1700 CPU socket right there for Intel 12th and 13th generation CPUs. This is obviously a pinless design, and you can actually see that this is basically a little cover right over here protects the CPU, all the pins underneath from getting damaged. And I always have a funny joke when I install this. I usually like to remove this plastic by myself. Some people cringe when they see that in previous videos. But you probably may have caught once or twice when I actually do leave the plastic on and I'm closing it. That plastic is supposed to pop out, but sometimes it pops out in a very comical fashion. And I'm pretty sure you probably had that experience yourself at some point or one day or another. Just below, we do have the NVMe main M2 slot. If you're going to be using that particular drive, which offers the best and ideal speed, that will be the slot you'll be using here. There is an additional slot down here for a secondary drive if you wish to use that in junction with this or basically as your main drive, but definitely do recommend this as well too. This piece of metal right over here is basically your heatsink. You can feel free to remove it and leave it off completely if your SSD does have a built-in heatsink or you plan to use one. And just below that, we do have our dedicated video card PCI Express slot. That would be the ideal slot using for your graphics card right there. As a matter of fact, it would probably be the ideal one because the slot just below here, and I'll get to that in just a moment, is just too far on the bottom that you'll probably not be serving your case any well if this motherboard just barely fits. Right over here, we actually do have a PCI Express X1 slot. And additionally, like I said here, we have another slot right over here. You can use a video card there, but not recommended for just basically ideal performance. Really do like the color scheme in this board. It's going to actually match up with the case I'll be using it in. It's basically a beige, kind of glacier white Be Quiet 500 case, and it's going to match everything up pretty nicely. So let's go ahead and jump into the build. After the build's over, we'll jump in and do a little bit of a BIOS overview as usual. So let's go ahead and check it out. Hope everyone enjoyed that quick build process over there. Go ahead and shoot a like and subscribe if you really enjoy what you're seeing right now. If you'd like to see some more, and just keep updated once new videos and reviews are updated and available for you to watch. So thanks again everyone for supporting me and enjoying the content and whatnot and seeing this channel grow. Alright, so you can see here our computer is up and running. Post time, I would say, on the first boot took about, I would say, maybe 20-25 seconds. It did actually reboot at one point, and here we are in the BIOS. So everything seems to be working a-okay. Temperature seems to be running at around 45 to 50 degrees Celsius, but mind you, this is a stock cooler, not an aftermarket cooler. That the temperature would definitely be much less. So as usual with MSI motherboards, we actually have an easy mode and advanced mode. You can toggle between the two of them just by clicking on this button here or clicking on F7 on the keyboard. On the upper left side here, we have the full CPU speed and DDR4 speed at the moment. This is DDR5 memory that we're using, just to remind you. Over here on the middle and on the right side of the screen, we actually have the current CPU temperature, motherboard temperature, and some other little details here, the full motherboard, CPU that we're using, memory size, and the current BIOS build date as well too. Dated into early January of 2023. Just under there, we actually have the boot priority. Feel free to go ahead and drag and drop all these as you need. Go ahead and set up your boot priority here and everything that you may need to do. Right now we have the hard drive as the main boot device. I put the USB thumb drive as a secondary. Feel free to go ahead and move anything else that you need to third or fourth. Basically, I'll just go through the entire order until one boot device is available. In the middle of the screen, we can immediately see some other more in detail options here. So right now we're looking at CPU. Can you see the full CPU current frequency? Some other options here, you like the multiplier, current base clock, and other little options like hyperthreading is currently enabled or disabled here as well. Clicking on memory, we can immediately see the current DRAM frequency, running at 4800 speed, what it's actually meant for. You can actually see the current memory amount. And down here, you actually see what's being used on out of the 4 DIMM slots as well. You can immediately see that I'm currently using 2 chips here in dual channel mode. They're actually in the ideal position, both of them 8 gigabytes each. Actually, just note you can even see the temperature of each memory chip as well too. Just below here, you do have the option to go ahead and see the current profile, the XMP profiles if there's any available. And up here, you can also go ahead and toggle the XMP profile as well too. Just by clicking on that little one. If there's multiple ones, you can go ahead and click on those as well too. You even do have the option to go ahead and set up your own custom profiles here as well too. Clicking on the next button, we actually do see the option for all current storage devices connected to this particular motherboard. Right now there's actually none connected, but you would actually see them here if there was any drive connected to any of the SATA ports or any NVMe drive connected to the M2 slot as well. Fan mode here as well too. You can actually go ahead and manipulate the fan speeds and whatnot. I actually prefer using the hardware monitor, which I'll get to in a moment. So you can actually go ahead and control the fan speed, temperature thresholds here as well too. Clicking on each button, you can actually see the current fan speed as well as the system temperature, and again the CPU core temperature down here. Clicking on help, you can immediately jump into a particular setting here in the BIOS if you go ahead and hit that particular hotkey. And on the bottom, we actually have a couple of more options here. MFlash is a little utility to go ahead and update the BIOS firmware as well too. Go ahead and click on this. Be sure you have a thumb drive plugged in and click on yes. So this thing will basically go ahead and reboot into the utility mode. Down here in favorites, you can go ahead and use a hotkey to select, save some favorite areas you have in the motherboard. You can set up the hotkey to immediately jump into that particular setting in the motherboard. On the rest of the section here, we do have the option for MFlash, which is basically the utility used to go ahead and update the BIOS firmware. Feel free to go ahead and click on this, and you'll be able to go ahead and have the computer reboot into the flash mode utility. Be sure you have a USB thumb drive with the latest BIOS update file that you actually want to go ahead and update to. Under favorites, we can immediately go ahead and jump into a favorite here. You can actually go ahead and set up a favorite here in the motherboard. So if you do have a favorite area that you like to jump into, you can go ahead and set up a hotkey for that. And one of my favorite options here is a hardware monitor. We can actually go ahead and manipulate the fan and temperature thresholds. Feel free to go ahead and click on one of your fans here and manually go ahead and select the voltage and the fan speed here as well. CPU usually does have the smart fan mode activated automatically,
which basically toggles the fan speed considering the temperature of the CPU. You actually do have the option to go ahead and toggle that for case fans as well too. Or feel free to go ahead and just actually decrease or increase these manually as well. You see the RPM go up and down as needed. And on the right here, we actually have some buttons here to go ahead and toggle and enable or disable certain options. I can go ahead and enable the sound card, or even another utility here like the LED control as well too. That is pretty much it for all the options you have here in easy mode. On the top, we actually do have the option to jump into advanced mode, or just by clicking on the F7 key on the keyboard as well too. Just on the right here, we also have F12 to take a screenshot. If you do have a USB thumb drive plugged in, you can go ahead and save your screenshot here just by hitting F12. If you actually do click on it, it'll just warn you that there's no USB thumb drive if you currently don't have one plugged in at the moment. Here you also do have the option to search for an option here. If you just type in any option here, you'll see all the options in the motherboard are related to that particular search query. And over here, pretty much you can go ahead and change the language in the motherboard that's presenting all the options. So let's go ahead and jump into advanced mode. Some options here are very similar to easy mode or pretty much the same. You can see the top, all the options haven't actually changed. Everything's still the same here. But you do have some more in-thorough settings here. So for example, let's jump into settings and jump into system status. You can immediately see all the information you saw earlier, a little bit more details here as well too. On the top here, you can also click on advanced, where you actually do see some more additional settings here, such as the option to disable some options here. Here we also have some additional options under advanced. You can actually see the option to go ahead and enable or disable some details here in integrated preferables. The option to go ahead and change default settings for the Intel built-in Thunderbolt connection, USB configuration, and some other options as well too. Very interesting option here to go ahead and engage secure arrays for any SSD connected to this particular motherboard. Clicking on boot, we do see more options here regarding the boot order and whatnot, and some other little details here as well too, such as having the number lock fully come on when the computer is turned on, and then some other little options here as well too. This actually really resembles BIOS from the past, very old-fashioned way to move the boot order around. You do have the option over here to do the same thing as you have this drag and drop option up here. Over here it looks like we have some more options to engage the administrator password, change settings for the TPM built in, and some other options here as well too. And of course you do have the option here to go ahead and save and exit your changes, or go ahead and just abandon all the changes and just reboot the entire motherboard computer as well too. Down here we have the option for overclocking, where you can easily go ahead and change radio frequencies, voltage, and other times as well too. As I mentioned before, be very careful when engaging any of these settings. If you're actually not too familiar with overclocking and other options there, I highly recommend you do not really change any of these settings, as you could potentially damage your hardware, motherboard, CPU, or memory, or all three of them as well too. So try not to go ahead and change anything here if you're not too familiar with it. Some very straightforward options you can actually go ahead and change is basically DRAM frequency. If you actually want to go ahead and adjust it manually, that's pretty straightforward. But other deep options here as well too, as you can see, voltage and timing, definitely needs more of an advanced touch there. On the bottom down here, we have our option for M-Flash, basically the same option I mentioned previously. Over here on the right side, we have OC profile. You can actually go ahead and save overclocking profiles you may have actually custom set yourself. So this is actually really useful if you want to go ahead and bounce between different custom profiles as opposed to immediately going back and forth changing all the settings. Feel free to go ahead and save these. You also do have the option to go ahead and save them or even load them from USB thumb drives, which I find very useful, especially if you're going to update your BIOS and all the settings basically get reverted back to default. Hardware monitor, same option I demonstrated earlier in easy mode. And beta runner, some little options here that I keep seeing looking different on every motherboard I actually do a review on. Seems like these options here I'm not even familiar with. Self-test for NVMe drives, which seems pretty useful. But not really too much information in the manual, but definitely can see if there's any updates to it to actually include more options or these options that are currently there. That is pretty much it for advanced mode and a quick overview of the entire BIOS and a lot of settings over here. Definitely go ahead and refer to the menu if you want to check out some more thorough review and view of the settings as well too. Or just let me know if you have any questions. I'll be more than happy to assist as much as I can.
Hey there, I just wanted to say thanks again for checking that video out. Hope you found it useful. Definitely shoot a like and subscribe if you enjoy the content and are looking forward to seeing more. I'd be more than happy to be doing more reviews, unboxings, and basically I'm actually going to be doing some follow-up videos on products I've reviewed previously, keyboards, mice, and maybe even some Surface tablets and devices I've actually had for about a year and a half. So definitely go ahead and subscribe if you're looking forward to that content. Thanks again for watching, and as always, stay safe. Take care.